I'm Danielle Brooks, and and this is my service dog, Rolo. I'm 20 years old, and I attend the University of Georgia, and I'm studying communication science and disorders to become a speech pathologist. Prior to narcolepsy, I was a very active child, straight A student, swam year-round, 8,000 yards a day, was on track to swim at a Division I school, and to possibly even make it to Olympic trials. I did normal stuff like go to birthday parties, have sleepovers, movie nights, and go on vacation. But around the age of 13, my life began to dramatically change, and my narcolepsy symptoms began to develop. The first red flag to my parents was when my algebra teacher called my parents and said I was being disrespectful in class because I was falling asleep and not being able to pay attention. I gained the nickname Bobblehead at school because I would laugh and my head would droop and fall on the table, and it would look very funny. I would be asleep in the car, on the way to school, on the way to and from swim practice. My mom would actually have my friends sit in the front seat so she would have someone to talk to because I would always be asleep. Swim practice got harder and harder to be able to make it through. My swimming times got so much worse. I began to get from one end of the pool to the other and not realize what I had done, which now I know is automatic behavior, and it was very scary. Staying awake and trying to focus during school and in class became almost impossible. I struggled concentrating. My notes would be really nice and then turn into chicken scratch because I would have that automatic behavior and try to be writing them down but get nothing out of it. I began to have very vivid and realistic dreams, and I would have to ask my parents, did we actually have that conversation? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. I had hypnagogic hallucinations, like people in your room or someone's chasing you or you don't know if that is real or not. And as my symptoms began to worsen, my parents took note. And I went to several doctors, and they just told me, oh, you're growing, or you're swimming 8,000 yards a day, you should be tired. Or it was iron, blood sugar, mono, yet none of those were actually what was wrong. My sister, who's quite the comedian, and she and I thought it was really cool that she could make me collapse. So we showed my parents, and they did not think it was so cool, and began to do some research. After looking up buckling knees and laughter, narcolepsy came up, and I had all of the symptoms. So we went to a neurologist and tried to get a sleep study, and he told us that we knew more than he did and that he couldn't help. And so we were yet again searching for another doctor. But luckily we came across a great doctor, and he was able to get me a sleep study and get the correct diagnosis. Getting a diagnosis was great, but that's when the challenge of learning to live with narcolepsy came into play. Simple, common tasks that I took for granted before narcolepsy became very difficult due to my narcolepsy. When it came to school, dating, making and keeping friends, going on elevators and in glass buildings, or even walking up and downstairs, my symptoms would always intervene. School, I only had 3 or 4 good awake hours during the day, so after lunch, I would be asleep in my classes. The elevators, glass buildings, and walking up and downstairs was when my cataplexy would kick in, which would mean I would have that what if I fall? And then that emotion of what if I fall would end up me falling down the stairs or getting a concussion in the driveway. These things started to really affect my social life, and I became a lot more reserved. Now I'll get into what I find to be one of the hardest parts about living with narcolepsy, and that is cataplexy. It is the sudden and temporary loss of muscle tone triggered by strong emotion. Well, I'd actually like scientists to expand their definition of this, because I, as well as other people with narcolepsy who have talked to, would agree in that cataplexy is always there. but it doesn't always show itself. I am constantly guarding myself and trying to prevent the cataplexy from flooding out, because then you end up on the floor or in a chair or not being able to speak. Some of my triggers for cataplexy is laughter, pain, fear, a cute little frog at a swim meet, to the palmetto bug that's running across the bathroom floor. For me, my cataplexy, what it feels like, it's like you're trapped in your own body. You can hear everything that's going on around you. Your vision's blurred. You struggle to breathe, and you can't do anything about it. After my narcolepsy diagnosis, my family and I made the conscious decision that narcolepsy was not going to define me, and that I really wanted to try to regain what I had lost. We agreed not to hide it and to talk about it openly, and to really try to reach out to others and connect and support others that are going through similar, if not the same, experiences. So the first thing I did after my diagnosis was I went back to swimming. And my coach that said he couldn't help, I left them and I found a new coach who would help me. He changed everything about my swimming. I went from a mid-distance swimmer with long practices to a sprinter with short practices, which allowed me to have a safe practice time that fit into my schedule. My times began to improve. I broke every school record. I was Gainesville Times Swimmer of the Year. I placed 5th in state. I was featured in the newspaper and spoke about my narcolepsy. I began to speak at the National Narcolepsy Network conferences. I started a website called Succeeding with Narcolepsy, which highlights people's stories who have narcolepsy and whether they're engineers, parents. I graduated and now attend the University of Georgia. I joined a sorority, and now I live on my own and I'm a full-time student. And then there's Rollo. Rollo and I are one of the first ever narcolepsy and cataplexy service dog alert teams in the country. And I could talk about him for a whole nother hour, but that's a different dinner conference. But this is where you all come into my story. With the help of doctors and my parents, I had the access to the right treatment options, which allowed me to accomplish all those things that I've mentioned to you. But without the access to the right treatment options, I would not have been able to accomplish any of that.